April 1945, Munich. The city lay in ruins, its proud buildings reduced to skeletal shadows beneath a sky thick with smoke. The war was ending, but the truth was only beginning to crawl from the ashes. Among the Allied troops sweeping through, Bavaria was Captain James Porter, an American soldier whose destiny would collide with a secret the world was never meant to uncover. His orders were simple: secure remaining Nazi facilities and report any intelligence of value. But what he found buried beneath the crumbling remains of the Third Reich was not a weapon, not gold, not even a document of surrender. It was something far more dangerous. The streets of Munich were ghostly quiet, littered with the remnants of a fallen empire. Porter moved through the fog with his unit, their boots crunching glass and debris as they approached a secluded villa on the outskirts of the city. The house, untouched by bombing, stood unnaturally intact, a frozen pocket of history preserved in destruction. Its gates were locked, windows shuttered, yet the air around it felt alive with secrecy. Porter forced his way inside, his flashlight slicing through dust and darkness. The walls were lined with books, strange symbols, and portraits not of Hitler but of obscure philosophers and occult figures. The deeper he ventured, the colder it grew, as if the house itself was guarding something. Then, in the basement, he found it, a steel chest bolted to the concrete floor. No swastika, no eagle insignia, only a strange rune carved into the metal, twisting into the number 88. It looked older than the war itself, something ancient reborn in steel. Porter called for backup, but his curiosity moved faster than orders. He pried open the chest with his rifle and froze. Inside lay a collection of leather-bound journals, each marked Erbe, legacy. The ink was fresh, the handwriting unmistakable. Adolf Hitler. Porter turned a page, his breath caught as he realized he was staring into the mind of a dying empire. These weren't battle notes or speeches, they were obsessions, confessions, fragments of thought written during the final collapse. Each entry trembled with paranoia and vision, words bleeding with madness. When the flesh fails, the vision must not die. One passage read, beneath a sketch of an underground vault beneath the Bavarian Alps. The handwriting shifted, controlled. One moment, erratic the next, as if two versions of the same man were fighting for dominance. Porter felt an unease settle in his chest. He'd seen horror, but this was different. This wasn't war. It was belief, immortalized in ink. Hitler's words spoke of der letzte Traum, the final dream, a plan to preserve the ideology. Beyond death through hidden artifacts, encoded manuscripts and loyal disciples. It wasn't fantasy, it was a blueprint. Porter could sense it, the beginning of something meant to outlive the war. As he read deeper, he found lists, names, symbols, coordinates, each tied to secret locations across Germany. At the bottom of one page, written in trembling strokes, were the words, "The Reich shall sleep beneath stone, and from stone it shall rise anew." Porter slammed the book shut, his pulse pounding. He knew what he held was not just a historical record, it was a prophecy. The journals radiated the same madness that had consumed Europe, and now it rested in his hands. Then he noticed a small envelope tucked beneath the pages, sealed with red wax. Inside was a map, hand-drawn, smudged, pointing toward a monastery near Berchtesgaden, Hitler's mountain refuge. Porter looked around the basement one last time. The air was heavy, thick with the residue of something unholy. Outside, the city burned. Inside, history whispered through ink and paper. Porter didn't yet realize it, but he had just uncovered Hitler's final secret, a secret that refused to die with him. Outside, the artillery fire faded into the distance, replaced by the eerie silence of surrender. Captain Porter stepped out of the villa, clutching the journals, unaware that shadows were already watching. Among the collapsing German command, Not all were ready to accept defeat. Some men still believed in der letzte Traum. Within hours, the word spread. A foreign officer had taken the Führer's final writings. Somewhere in the ruins, men loyal to an idea sharper than bullets began to move. Porter reported his discovery to his superiors, but the chaos of war's end turned communication into confusion. Files vanished, orders conflicted, and before dawn, his convoy was ambushed on the road out of Munich. Bullets tore through the fog. Porter dove for cover, clutching the chest as his comrades fell one by one. The attackers weren't regular soldiers. They moved with precision, silent, organized. These were not men fighting for survival. They were protecting a legacy. When the gunfire stopped, Porter was bleeding, but alive. He crawled toward the burning jeep, the journals still in his grasp. A figure approached through the smoke, a man in a long black coat, face hidden, insignia burned away. "You were not meant to find it," the man said in perfect English. Porter raised his pistol, but the stranger only smiled. "The dream cannot die with one man." Then he disappeared into the forest, leaving Porter with more questions than answers. He managed to reach an Allied outpost the next morning, delirious but determined. The chest was confiscated, sealed and marked, classified, eyes only. What happened next was buried under decades of silence. Reports of the journals vanished from military archives. Porter was reassigned, questioned, then quietly discharged. But something changed in him. He began to dig, tracing the whispers of an underground movement across Europe, one that called itself the Architects of the New Dawn. Their symbol matched the rune carved on the chest. 88. Over the next months, strange recoveries surfaced. Artifacts, gold, coded texts, all pointing toward a hidden network of Nazi loyalists preserving knowledge and power. Porter's obsession grew. He returned to Munich in late 1946, this time alone, determined to find the monastery from the map. The war was over, but the hunt had just begun. The journey led him deep into the Bavarian Alps, where mist rolled like ghosts and silence echoed with the memory of bombs. After days of searching, he found it, a monastery carved into stone, untouched by time. Inside, monks greeted him with calm eyes that seemed to know more than they revealed. When Porter showed them the map, their silence deepened. "Some secrets," one monk said, "were never meant for men to keep." That night, Porter discovered a sealed crypt beneath the chapel floor. The same rune was etched on the door. He pried it open with trembling hands and entered a chamber filled with relics, strange devices, metallic discs inscribed with symbols, and glass cylinders containing what looked like preserved manuscripts. In the center stood a pedestal, and upon it a single black notebook. Porter opened it and froze. The handwriting was Hitler's again. "If you read this," it began, "then the dream lives on." The pages spoke of transferring ideology into art, science, and the minds of those who would shape the next century. Porter realized the truth. Hitler's final secret wasn't a weapon. It was an idea, immortal, patient, hidden within generations to come. The chamber lights flickered, and for the first time, fear took the form of understanding. He closed the notebook, knowing that exposing it could ignite what millions had died to extinguish. As dawn broke over the Alps, Porter sealed the chamber, leaving the relics untouched. History would call the war over, but he knew better. Evil doesn't die. It waits, buried, silent, dreaming. Munich was burning, its proud avenues reduced to rubble and ghosts. The once vibrant heart of Nazi Germany had become a graveyard of dreams. The Allies were closing in, the Reich collapsing under its own delusions. Amid the smoldering ruins, 1,000 secrets waited to be discovered. Files, prototypes, experiments, and the final whispers of a regime that refused to die quietly. Among those walking the ashes was Captain William Porter of the U.S. Army Intelligence Corps, a man whose quiet eyes hid the exhaustion of years spent chasing rumors and decoding lies. He had come to Germany not for glory, but for truth. Since 1943, Porter had been part of a small intelligence group tasked with tracking Nazi research projects. They called themselves the Ghost Hunters. Their job was to follow trails others dismissed as myth, strange energy programs, psychological weapons, and unrecorded scientific expeditions. When Berlin began to fall, their orders changed. Move south, secure anything the SS tried to move or hide. Munich became their final stop. Rumors spoke of a secret convoy that left Berlin in the last days, carrying something Hitler personally ordered protected. No one knew what it was: gold, documents, technology, or something darker. Porter's team arrived on April 27, 1945. The city was chaos. Civilians hid in basements, soldiers disguised themselves as monks, and the sound of gunfire echoed like broken thunder. The Luftwaffe headquarters stood abandoned, its offices stripped, but in the sub-levels they found burnt papers stamped with a single insignia: Project Morgenröte, Project Dawn. Porter felt the familiar chill of curiosity. He gathered the fragments, equations, sketches of circular machines, and a line of text translated roughly as "the light that never dies." His superior dismissed it as desperate propaganda, but Porter couldn't shake the feeling that it meant something more. Over the next 2 days, his team swept through laboratories, archives, and the ruins of the SS Academy. Everywhere they found evidence of an operation moved west just before the fall, always marked by the same code. Locals whispered of trains leaving at night, guarded by men in black uniforms without insignia. They said the convoys carried no gold, only crates sealed in lead. One woman claimed she saw trucks drive toward the mountains, escorted by strange vehicles with no visible markings. Porter documented everything, filing reports that would never be read. The war had become a race not just for victory, but for knowledge that could shape the next century. The Americans, the Soviets, even the British, all were hunting for what Hitler's scientists had built in secret. It was no longer about weapons alone. It was about power hidden behind equations, symbols, and ideas. Porter's instincts told him the truth was buried beneath Munich. On April 29th, his team received an encrypted message: "Secure Villa. Priority 1. Documents indicate classified research unit on site." The address led to the outskirts of the city, where a crumbling estate stood half-consumed by fire. The gates were marked with the same rune he had seen before. Inside, the air smelled of dust and oil. They found the remains of a laboratory: broken glass, melted instruments, walls covered with charts of atomic diagrams. In the corner, a sealed iron chest bore the initials AH. The lock was complex, military-grade, engraved with the symbol of Project Morgenröte. Porter hesitated, sensing the weight of history behind that seal. He forced it open with a crowbar, and inside he found notebooks, pages of calculations, sketches, and personal notes written in a familiar slanted hand. His breath caught. It was Hitler's handwriting. The notes spoke not of weapons or bombs, but of energy reborn, purity through light, and continuation beyond flesh. Porter stared in disbelief. He realized he had just uncovered the Führer's final secret project, a vision of a new dawn, meant to outlive death itself. And someone had tried very hard to make sure no one ever found it. The discovery changed everything. Porter's team knew they had found something beyond standard intelligence, something that defied the logic of war. The notebooks were written half in code, half in obsession. Words like transcendence, rebirth, and illumination repeated across pages, linked to sketches of devices powered by radiation and light. The deeper they read, the clearer it became. This was not a scientific manual. It was a manifesto disguised as research. Porter realized the project's goal wasn't just to build a bomb, but to create a new kind of power, a continuation of ideology through science. They had stumbled upon the foundation of a belief system that Hitler thought would make his vision eternal. That night, as rain battered the broken villa, Porter stayed awake, studying the symbols. He noticed one recurring pattern, two overlapping circles with a central flame. He'd seen it once before, years earlier, in a captured document about the Thule Society. The connection chilled him. He began to suspect that Project Morgenröte was born not from military science, but from the occult. His reports grew longer, more urgent, but his superiors were skeptical. The Allies wanted tangible technology, rockets, blueprints, weaponry, not philosophy. Yet Porter knew that ideology could be more dangerous than any bomb. On April 30th, as news spread of Hitler's death in Berlin, the mood among the troops shifted from exhaustion to disbelief. For some, the war was finally over. For Porter, it was just beginning. He was ordered to move the recovered materials to an Allied command post in Augsburg. The notebooks were sealed in a crate, marked, "Scientific evidence, do not open." Porter argued that they needed translation first, but the order was clear. He obeyed. The convoy left Munich under grey skies, weaving through roads littered with wreckage. At a checkpoint outside Dachau, they met British officers who seemed unusually informed about Porter's find. They demanded custody of the crate, citing Joint Intelligence Authority. Porter refused without written confirmation. The standoff lasted minutes until gunfire erupted from the tree line. Chaos followed. Porter dove behind a truck as bullets shattered the windshield. Two of his men fell instantly. The attackers moved with chilling precision, trained, silent, faceless. When it ended, the British officers were gone, and so was the crate. Porter found only tire tracks leading toward the forest. He followed them for hours, blood mixing with mud on his hands. Finally, he reached a clearing where the tracks disappeared near a burned-out cottage. Inside, he found the remains of the crate, splintered, half-empty. The notebooks were gone, but a single page lay in the ashes. Written in German, it read, "The light survives in the mountain." Porter froze. He knew what it meant. He had seen maps pointing toward the Bavarian Alps, the same area linked to hidden Nazi installations. Exhausted and furious, he returned to Munich and filed a report that would vanish into classified archives. His commanders dismissed the story as confusion caused by fatigue. Officially, the materials were destroyed in the ambush. Unofficially, whispers began circulating among intelligence circles that fragments of Hitler's research had been taken by an unknown faction. Over the following weeks, Porter's name appeared on lists connected to sensitive findings. Colleagues avoided him. Letters went missing. His housing was searched twice by unidentified officers. Then came a quiet reassignment to London, followed by silence. But Porter wasn't done. He kept copies of the maps, sketches, and a single line from the burned note. He knew the meaning of the phrase. Somewhere in the Alps, the truth was waiting. Years later, declassified records would confirm secret Allied operations conducted in those mountains. None officially acknowledged by name, all searching for one thing, a vault that could rewrite the story of the war. Porter was the first to find the trail. He just didn't know yet that following it would cost him everything. Porter's reassignment to London felt less like a reward and more like exile. The war had technically ended, but his mind refused to rest. The unanswered questions clawed at him every night. The missing notebooks, the ambush, and the strange phrase burned into his memory. The light survives in the mountain. In early 1946, while working under the British War Office, Porter stumbled across a confidential memo referencing unsecured German research assets in the Bavarian Alps. The name Project Morgenröte appeared again, redacted but unmistakable. He knew then that the mission wasn't over. It had simply changed hands. He began compiling everything he remembered, sketching the symbols, retracing every road from Munich to the foothills of the Alps. Most of his colleagues dismissed him as a man haunted by war, but one woman believed him, Dr. Eleanor Graves, a physicist working with captured German scientists under Operation Paperclip. She had seen similar symbols in documents smuggled from Berlin, where occult groups once funded early energy experiments. She warned him that what he was chasing wasn't just lost technology. It was ideology wearing the mask of science. Porter listened, but he couldn't let go. Together, they reviewed fragments of notes, trying to decode what Hitler's final secret could have meant. References to light beyond death and continuation of will suggested something beyond nuclear physics. Graves believed the writings hinted at an attempt to merge spiritual belief with scientific power, a weapon of influence, not destruction. He wanted immortality, she said, not for himself, but for his idea. The words haunted Porter. If that was true, then the project could still exist, not as machinery, but as men. One evening, while reviewing declassified German communication logs, Porter noticed recurring transmissions between Munich, Innsbruck, and a location deep in the mountains labeled Edelweiss Station. The dates matched the convoy's final movement. No official record listed such a station. The coordinates led to an area near Obersalzberg, once the heart of Hitler's private command network. Porter felt the pull again, the same sense of unfinished purpose. He requested permission to investigate, but was denied. 2 days later, he resigned. Graves, against her orders, gave him one final clue, a coded passage from the recovered Thule archives describing a gate of radiance carved into stone. With little more than a map and a revolver, Porter boarded a supply truck bound for southern Germany. The post-war landscape was unrecognizable. Towns divided, soldiers trading uniforms for ration cards, and shadows of a war everyone wanted to forget. Yet in that silence, something unseen still moved. When Porter reached the Alps, he found a land both beautiful and broken. Locals spoke in whispers about fire in the mountain during the final days of the war, and soldiers who went searching never returned. He followed a path through valleys scarred by bombing, sleeping in abandoned huts, chasing echoes of a past the world had chosen to bury. On the 5th day, he reached a monastery marked on his old map. But when he entered, he realized it was no sanctuary. It was a fortress disguised as faith. The monks were gone, replaced by silence thick enough to feel. Beneath the chapel floor, he found fresh footprints leading into a tunnel. The air grew colder with every step, walls lined with steel and cables. He followed the passage for nearly an hour until it opened into a vast underground chamber, lit by a single generator. Crates bearing the same rune were stacked along the walls. At the center stood a metallic ring, 12 feet wide, marked with symbols matching the notebooks. Porter's breath froze. He had found Edelweiss Station. But the facility wasn't abandoned. A voice echoed from the shadows. "You were expected." Porter turned, gun raised, and saw a man in an SS uniform stripped of insignia, holding one of the missing notebooks. "We've been waiting," the man said. "The dream is not over." Porter froze, heart pounding against his ribs, gun trembling in his hand. The man stepped closer, his face illuminated by the flickering light of the generator. He was older, calm, eyes like steel. "My name doesn't matter," he said softly. "What matters is that you've arrived exactly as predicted." Porter demanded to know what this place was, what the machine meant. The man smiled faintly. "You wouldn't understand. None of you did. While the world burned cities, we built a bridge." He gestured to the metallic ring, its surface etched with runes that shimmered faintly. This was the culmination of Project Morgenröte. The continuation of vision, energy purified through consciousness, Porter scoffed. "You mean madness?" The man's smile widened. "Madness is what wins wars when logic fails." He turned a dial on a nearby console, and the machine emitted a low hum that vibrated through the walls. Blue light flickered inside the ring, swirling like liquid lightning. Porter aimed his gun. "Turn it off." "I can't," the man replied. "It has already begun." "You think the war ended because we lost?" "No, Captain. The war ended because we moved beyond it." Porter fired, hitting the man in the shoulder. He collapsed, clutching his wound but laughing through the pain. "You can't stop an idea," he hissed. Porter rushed to the console, smashing switches and tearing cables. Sparks erupted. The machine screamed like a living thing. The blue vortex pulsed, expanding, filling the chamber with blinding light. Porter ducked behind a crate as a shockwave tore through the room, throwing him against the wall. When the noise faded, silence returned, unnatural, heavy. Smoke drifted through the ruins of the machine. The man lay motionless, eyes open but seeing nothing. Porter crawled forward, checking the body, then the notebook still clutched in his dead hand. Most of it was burned, but one line survived. The dream will rise again where light and faith meet stone. Porter stumbled to his feet, disoriented. The generator was dead. The tunnel behind him had partially collapsed. He grabbed the notebook and began searching for another exit. Deeper within the chamber, he found a second tunnel leading upward. As he climbed, he heard distant voices, German but faint, echoing from somewhere beyond the rock. When he finally emerged, it was dawn. The mountains glowed red under the rising sun, and below, smoke rose from the monastery. Allied patrols were approaching, drawn by the explosion. Porter waved, signaling them down, but his mind was spinning. He had destroyed the machine, but not the idea. Within hours, the site was swarmed by intelligence officers. They confiscated everything, notes, remains, even the fragments of the ring. Porter was taken into questioning for days. His report dismissed as psychological fatigue induced by combat stress. When he protested, his superiors silenced him with classified orders. "You were never there, Captain," they told him, and nothing existed beneath that mountain. Porter knew better. He was released weeks later, exhausted, stripped of clearance. But whispers followed him. He heard of scientists quietly disappearing, of shipments labeled reconstruction materials heading to unknown facilities. Operation Paperclip was underway, and Porter suspected that fragments of Project Morgenröte were already being absorbed by new powers. Late one night, Graves visited him in secret. "They're continuing it," she said, trembling. "Not the machine, but the principle. Psychological endurance, ideological control, the power to rebuild belief." Porter stared at her. "Then the war isn't over," he said. She nodded. "It never will be." The next morning she was gone. No record, no trace. Porter filed a final report, sealed it in a private vault, and vanished from military records. The official narrative said he retired in 1947. Unofficially, he disappeared into the Alps again. Some say he died there. Others claim he left clues buried in the ruins of Edelweiss Station. In 1952, climbers discovered a single rusted revolver and a burned notebook wedged between stones near a mountain pass. Inside was one final line written in fading ink. "The dream sleeps, but it breathes through those who remember." For years, Porter's name existed only in classified margins, erased from history, but not from the truth. The war had ended for the world, but for him, it had simply shifted shape. In 1948, buried deep in post-war archives, a British analyst uncovered an unmarked file labeled Porter Inquiry, subject Morgenröte. The file contained fragments of destroyed reports, sketches of the ring device, and a transcript from a lost interrogation. It revealed that Porter had been questioned by multiple agencies, the OSS, MI6, and even early CIA divisions, all asking the same question: what did he see beneath the mountain? His answers varied, sometimes calm, sometimes frenzied. He spoke of light without heat, energy without fuel, and a philosophy built not on domination, but preservation. They didn't plan to win the war, he told them. They planned to survive it. But none of his testimony reached the public record. Every page was redacted, stamped top secret. Years passed. Europe rebuilt. The ashes of the Reich scattered into the soil. But in those ashes, old ideas took root again. Porter vanished from known records in 1949, though rumors placed him in Austria, living under a false identity. Then in 1951, an anonymous tip reached Allied command, claims of strange activity in an abandoned bunker near Garmisch-Partenkirchen. Locals reported seeing lights at night, hearing machines humming deep within the earth. The site matched Porter's last known map coordinates. A new investigation was launched, unofficially led by Colonel David Hensley, an American intelligence officer who had studied Porter's vanished file. Hensley was skeptical but intrigued. He assembled a small team of operatives under the guise of infrastructure assessment and moved into the Bavarian region. What they found echoed Porter's nightmares. The bunker was real, partially collapsed, yet clearly maintained. Fresh footprints in the dust, recent wiring, and traces of chemical residue matching 1940s experimental compounds. At its core, they found the remnants of the same metallic ring Porter had described, half reconstructed. But there was more. New inscriptions had been carved into the walls, phrases in Latin mixed with fragments of Nietzschean philosophy. Light is the will made eternal. Death is transformation. The parallels to the original Morgenrother notes were undeniable. Hensley ordered everything photographed and sealed, but before extraction could begin, the generator reactivated on its own. The air turned electric, the ring glowing faintly. Instruments spiked uncontrollably. Panic spread through the team as radio interference crackled with German transmissions, voices repeating, "Der Traum lebt, the dream lives." Hensley ordered evacuation, but two men refused, claiming to hear something inside the static, words calling their names. Moments later, the power surged. The chamber lit up with blinding blue light, identical to what Porter had described years before. When it faded, the men were gone. No trace, no remains, only two sets of burned footprints. Hensley sealed the bunker and classified the event as structural collapse. His report was buried within weeks, but privately he wrote a letter to his superior stating whatever Porter saw was real. It has awakened again. The file was never acknowledged. In 1953, the newly formed CIA established a covert research division focusing on ideological transmission and endurance. Many of its early studies referenced German documents recovered after the war, labeled Morgenrother Sub A. Porter's name appeared once more, in a memo describing non-physical propagation of belief systems. Though never publicly linked, the research evolved into what decades later would be called psychological influence warfare. Porter's story faded into whispers, his discoveries recast as myth. Yet those who studied his notes saw patterns that couldn't be coincidence. Recurring symbols, recurring phrases, recurring disappearances near the same mountains. The war had ended, but its ghost still lingered, humming beneath Europe's surface. And somewhere in the cold quiet of forgotten tunnels, the light that refused to die was waiting for its next hand to hold it. Years after the official files closed, whispers of the Porter phenomenon began resurfacing among post-war scientists, especially those involved in early nuclear and psychological studies. Declassified notes from the 1960s hinted that fragments of the Munich device had been recovered, quietly transferred to American research facilities under Operation Paperclip. Porter's name resurfaced on the edges of those documents, cited as the original civilian contact of the Morgenrother anomaly. Some scientists dismissed the connection as superstition, yet others claimed that the magnetic and optical readings from the fragments didn't conform to any known alloy structure. They pulsed slightly rhythmically like a heartbeat. The data was buried under technical jargon, but a note in the margin read, "Not mechanical," possibly responsive. Meanwhile, Porter himself remained untraceable. In 1964, a journalist named Thomas Veit stumbled upon a sealed chest in a Bavarian farmhouse. Inside were photographs, sketches, and fragments of journals signed AP. The handwriting matched Porter's declassified notes. Among the papers was a letter addressed to The Finder, dated 1952. It read, "They think it ended. It didn't. They believe they buried it. But you cannot bury light. It leaks through every crack." Veit attempted to publish the find, but before the article went to print, his apartment was broken into and the chest disappeared. He died in a car crash 3 days later. No official link was made, but those who knew him claimed he was being followed. By the late 1970s, a classified NATO division known as Section 13 quietly reopened the Morgenrother file under the guise of Cold War counter-research. Their goal was to locate any remaining German experimental sites tied to energy field thought synchronization. Former operatives later testified, under anonymity, that Section 13's Munich branch conducted field tests in underground facilities once used by the SS. One operative described seeing a circular structure in perfect condition, still functional, emitting low-frequency vibrations. The report concluded with a line eerily similar to Porter's, "The light is not dead." In the 1990s, fragments of these stories began leaking online through forgotten forums and conspiracy bulletins. Some dismissed them as urban legends, yet certain details, coordinates, code phrases, and architectural layouts matched declassified wartime blueprints exactly. In 2004, a retired intelligence archivist, known only by his pseudonym Rex, uploaded scanned copies of what he claimed were the original Morgenröter schematics. Within 24 hours, the files were removed, his account deleted, and his location never traced. But one image survived in digital circulation, a blurry photograph showing a metallic ring partially buried in snow, its surface marked with geometric etchings that glowed faintly even in grayscale. Digital analysts later confirmed that the glow wasn't photographic error, it was emitting infrared light when captured. This reignited global curiosity. Independent researchers began traveling to Bavaria, searching for remnants of the site. One such explorer, Lena Hartmann, a German physicist and historian, documented a descent into an abandoned SS tunnel network near Oberammergau in 2012. Her final entry described a low vibration in the air, rhythmic pulsing like breath. The next day, her GPS tracker stopped transmitting. She was never found. The story reignited old fears and new obsessions. Modern documentaries speculated endlessly. Was it advanced Nazi technology, a failed atomic experiment, or something beyond physics? Yet the official record remains silent. Governments deny the project's existence. No confirmation, no closure. But through all the silence, one question endures. If Porter's final notes were true, and the machine wasn't a weapon but a vessel, then what exactly was it meant to carry? Some say consciousness, others say memory. A few, more daring, suggest it carried ideology itself, the will of a dying regime, preserved like a seed waiting for fertile ground. Today, in the quiet corners of classified archives, Porter's name still flickers like static. Files redacted, pages burned, but his words survive, haunting in their simplicity. The light that refuses to die isn't evil or divine, it's human. And as long as one person remembers, it will never fade. Whether those words were prophecy or warning remains unknown. But every few years, hikers still report seeing strange blue flickers deep in the Bavarian woods, followed by a faint hum, like a machine awakening after decades of sleep. Maybe it's coincidence. Maybe it's the echo of something long buried. Or maybe, as Porter believed, the past never really ends. It just waits for us to find it again. When the war ended, the ruins of Munich became a labyrinth of buried secrets. The Allies combed through bunkers, vaults, and collapsed laboratories, searching for anything tied to Germany's experimental research. Among thousands of confiscated documents, one folder stood out, its cover marked only by a red insignia shaped like a spiral sun. Inside were sketches resembling concentric circles, energy readings, and coded transmissions marked Morgenröter. At the top corner, a faint signature read, A. Porter. American intelligence immediately flagged it for translation. But much of the material had already been partially burned. Reports show that the Office of Strategic Services, the OSS, classified the folder under unverified phenomena. Its contents were sent to Washington, where they vanished into restricted archives. Months later, a joint debrief between British and American scientists noted that fragments of a metallic structure, recovered from an underground vault in Munich, showed no trace of conventional metal composition. The samples emitted low radiation, but produced no measurable heat. It's as if the atoms are asleep, one scientist wrote. Arthur Porter, however, was never credited. His name disappeared from all records after May 1945. Some believed he was silenced by bureaucracy. Others suspected something darker, that the Americans wanted to erase all traces of the project to keep its secrets for themselves. Rumors emerged that a select group of physicists who examined the fragments were reassigned to secret facilities in New Mexico and Nevada under new codenames. These scientists, once experts in wartime engineering, suddenly specialized in field resonance experiments. The connection was never proven, but declassified documents decades later revealed similar circular patterns appearing in early American prototype designs, especially in the 1947 Roswell incident investigations. Though the world celebrated peace, a few insiders whispered that the war hadn't truly ended. It had simply changed its name. By 1946, Porter was reportedly seen in Geneva, then again in Lisbon, always near transport hubs, always carrying a sealed metal case. Witnesses described him as pale, exhausted, muttering phrases in German mixed with numbers. One recalled hearing him say, "It remembers." The phrase became a legend among post-war archivists. But no one knew what it referred to. Years later, an anonymous letter reached the British War Office, postmarked from Switzerland. It contained a single page, written in Porter's handwriting. "They buried the truth beneath the rubble, but it hums still. Find the light before it finds you." The page was archived and forgotten. Yet strange phenomena continued in the Bavarian region. Locals reported seeing glowing mist near old military tunnels, hearing rhythmic vibrations through the soil. Military patrols were dispatched but found nothing. The site was eventually sealed off under the pretense of unexploded ordnance. But off the record, several officers claimed their compasses failed near the area, and radios emitted static shaped like a pulse. Over time, the story became a ghost tale, Munich's beating earth, they called it. A few scientists who revisited the data decades later proposed a rational explanation: seismic resonance caused by collapsing tunnels. But the readings didn't match. The frequencies were consistent, deliberate. In 1950, a classified British report concluded, "Energy signatures consistent with artificial harmonic generation. Source unknown." The document was stamped top secret and vanished soon after. The Cold War began, and the focus shifted from the ruins of the Third Reich to the tension between new superpowers. Yet somewhere beneath those ruins, the remnants of Hitler's final secret might still rest, pulsing faintly like a buried heart. Those who studied the data understood one grim implication. If the Morgenröter device truly manipulated atomic resonance through thought synchronization, then it wasn't a bomb at all. It was communication between mind and matter. Porter may have realized too late that he hadn't destroyed it, only awakened it. His final journal entry, found decades later, read, "We thought it was a weapon. It was a mirror." The meaning remains debated, but one interpretation endures among historians, that the device reflected not power, but intent. The darker the ambition, the stronger it responded. And perhaps that's why its energy never faded, because humanity's hunger for dominance, even after victory, remained the same. Whether buried, studied, or forgotten, the machine's pulse continues to echo, proof that some wars never truly end. They simply change form. In the years that followed, Munich rebuilt itself from ash, stone, and silence. The war's scars faded under neon lights and new architecture, but beneath the city's foundations, the old tunnels remained, sealed, classified, untouched. Decades later, when post-war declassification began, only fragments of the Morgenröter file resurfaced, scattered across archives in Washington, London, and Bonn. Each document seemed incomplete, missing pages, missing coordinates, and in some cases, entire paragraphs blacked out. Yet a few lines stood untouched, written in Porter's unmistakable hand: "Light remembers what the living forget." For intelligence historians, that single phrase became the riddle that defined his legacy. By 1978, A wave of freedom of information requests from researchers forced intelligence agencies to release portions of the Munich operation reports. Inside one folder, buried under engineering notes, was a hand-drawn diagram labeled Circular Core M-Type. Around it were notations in two languages, English and German, suggesting a post-war collaboration between captured German scientists and American physicists. The handwriting on the English annotations matched that of Dr. Harlan Meeks, a Manhattan Project veteran, later stationed at Los Alamos. In the margin of one diagram, Meeks had scribbled, "The Porter sample behaves as though it's listening." His note was dismissed as poetic exaggeration, but the phrasing raised questions that no one could answer. If the material was inert, why describe it as reactive? Why refer to resonance instead of radiation? These inconsistencies built the foundation of decades of speculation. The theory that Hitler's final project had not been a weapon of destruction, but of communication. The Munich underground was said to be the testing ground for an interface designed to read thought as energy. Modern scientists still argue whether such technology was possible, but the pattern repeats. Identical blueprints found in Soviet archives, later echoed in early American psychotronic experiments. The same circular geometry, the same spiral symmetry. Porter's name kept reappearing in those files, never as a subject, always as an author. His identity blurred into myth. Some called him a traitor who sold Nazi secrets to the Allies. Others believed he was a whistleblower who tried to destroy what he discovered. A third theory, more disturbing, claimed Porter was never just an engineer, but a test subject, chosen because of a rare neurological condition that made him sensitive to electromagnetic fields. According to an unverified OSS memo, he survived direct exposure to the device for 47 seconds, longer than anyone else. After that, he was never the same. Witnesses described him as detached, unfocused, speaking in fragmented sentences. "It hears us," he once told an interrogator, "and it wants to finish what they started." The interrogator dismissed the claim as trauma-induced delusion. Yet decades later, researchers discovered audio recordings from the same session stored in an Air Force vault. In one segment, faint background noise interfered with the tape. A slow, rhythmic hum, unlike any mechanical static of the era. Audio experts analyzed the frequencies and found them to match seismic readings from the Bavarian Alps recorded that same day. Coincidence or connection? The military never commented. But the file's last line, added years later, simply read, "Case closed. No further inquiry permitted." Still, the legends endured. Locals spoke of phantom vibrations near Garmisch-Partenkirchen, where Allied trucks once transported confiscated materials. Hikers described unnatural warmth in patches of frozen soil, compasses spinning wildly before returning to normal. One night in 1983, a security patrol at a decommissioned bunker reported hearing a metallic ringing deep below the ground. When they returned the next morning, the entrance was sealed with concrete and the guards reassigned. No report was filed. Decades passed, and the mystery sank into history's shadows until a digital archivist uncovered the Porter reels in 2011, film canisters mislabeled as weather footage. The reels showed a flickering laboratory, a metal ring, and a silhouette of a man standing before it, unmoving as light bent around him. The film abruptly cut to white. Experts authenticated the footage, but the final frame revealed a date stamp, April 29, 1945, the day before Hitler's death. The implication was chilling. While Berlin fell, something else was awakening in Munich. Whether Porter succeeded in destroying it or merely containing it, no one can say. His final recorded words, retrieved from a notebook found decades later, still echo with cryptic finality. "It's not about power or faith. It's about reflection. The machine only amplifies what's already there." In the end, historians agree on one truth. Whatever Hitler's last secret was, it died with Porter. Or maybe, like the hum beneath Bavaria's soil, it never died at all. It just learned to wait. History often hides its darkest truths, not behind lies, but behind silence. Munich, the city that once echoed with war, laughter, and ruin, still carries whispers of the forgotten project buried beneath its streets. While the world focused on reconstruction, a quiet network of post-war engineers and archivists spent decades tracing every rumor tied to Arthur Porter and the Morgenröte device. Most found nothing but dead ends, destroyed tunnels, missing blueprints, vanished witnesses. Yet patterns emerged where logic failed. Reports from Cold War intelligence briefings repeatedly mentioned anomalies near former Nazi research sites, electromagnetic spikes, unexplained heat signatures, compass deviations, all dismissed as geological interference. But the timing of these readings often aligned with historical anniversaries tied to the Third Reich's collapse. Coincidence maybe, or echo? Among the few remaining wartime physicists, some claimed that Morgenröte was never meant for destruction at all, but rebirth. Porter's journals, once scattered across confiscated archives, described energy not as weaponry, but as awakening. They wanted a sun, he wrote, but what they built was a mirror that burns. His metaphors baffled investigators, yet certain details matched verified scientific attempts at resonance amplification. What unsettled them most was his recurring phrase, the pulse beneath thought. He described it as a universal rhythm connecting life, light, and memory. Modern physicists interpret it as poetic nonsense, yet the measured frequencies from the Munich vault debris aligned uncannily with those found in brainwave patterns. Decades later, secret research under Project Echo sought to replicate that synchronization. Documents revealed test subjects exposed to low-frequency resonance fields reported auditory hallucinations, voices whispering in German, Latin, and unknown codes. A line from a debrief reads, "The subject insists the voice said, 'Wir sind nicht tot, we are not dead.'" The program was shut down within weeks. Unofficially, the recordings vanished from the archives. Still, the legend persisted. A declassified CIA memo dated 1969 referred to the Porter constant, a theoretical frequency representing the threshold where human cognition and electromagnetic resonance intersect. No one could explain why that name was chosen or why the data was later classified again. By the 1980s, historians dismissed it as Cold War paranoia. But even skeptics couldn't ignore one unshakable detail: the recurring hum recorded across multiple sites, identical frequencies, identical intensity, across time and distance, as though something was still transmitting. Local legends filled the gaps science refused to acknowledge. Villagers near the Bavarian Alps told stories of ghost lights flickering in old tunnels, of machines humming beneath their feet during thunderstorms. One shepherd claimed his entire flock froze when the air began to vibrate like a heartbeat. Officials investigated, found nothing, and buried the reports. Yet those who went near the sealed entrances often returned disoriented, describing sensations of being watched through the air. The myths turned to folklore, the folklore turned to documentaries, and somewhere in the noise, the truth was lost. But for every skeptic who laughed, one researcher would come forward quietly with a file, a sound clip, a thermal image, proof that something still moved underground. Even today, the coordinates of the original Munich facility remain restricted. Satellite imagery blurs the area automatically, as if protected by invisible censorship. Conspiracy or coincidence, no one knows. What we do know is that every government touched the file, studied it, then buried it again. The hum still appears on seismic monitors once every few years, never long, just a few seconds, always at the same frequency, the same heartbeat. For those who believe Porter's final words, it means the mirror still reflects. That somewhere beneath Munich's modern streets, the machine that was meant to end an empire remains alive, not as a weapon, but as a memory made metal. It listens, it waits, and maybe, just maybe, it remembers the voices that built it. For in the end, history doesn't die. It simply finds new listeners. For decades, the story of Arthur Porter remained a classified rumor, an unfinished footnote in the chaos of World War II. But time, like the hum beneath Munich's soil, refuses to stay silent forever. In 1998, an unmarked crate surfaced in a Berlin museum's private archive. Inside were reels of damaged film, brittle notebooks, and a rusted insignia shaped like a spiral sun. The curator assumed it was a misplaced art piece until one reel was restored. The footage, though grainy, showed the same underground chamber described in the OSS files: circular walls, symbols etched into metal, and a figure standing motionless before the machine. When the film flickered to its final frame, the image froze on a burst of light, brief, radiant, blinding. The curator, unsettled, turned off the projector. Within weeks, the reels vanished. No theft report was filed. Only a sealed letter remained, signed by an anonymous official. For the safety of reason itself, do not reopen what was meant to stay asleep. That warning became an obsession among conspiracy historians. Some argued the letter was a forgery. Others insisted it was genuine. But one truth persisted. The hum recorded in the Munich region continued, faint but measurable. In 2007, satellite sensors captured low-frequency anomalies along the Isar River. Engineers blamed underground transit systems, but geologists disagreed. The vibrations were too rhythmic, too intentional, and every reading, without fail, occurred at midnight on April 29th, the anniversary of Porter's last known location. The world, busy with its modern wars and digital noise, barely noticed. Yet among historians of the occult and physicists of the fringe, one theory took root: that Porter never escaped Munich at all. That his consciousness, exposed to the Morgenröte field, was absorbed into the machine he tried to destroy. Some even claim that the faint hum is not a machine's echo, but a man's mind, endlessly repeating its final thought. A strange comfort hides in that idea, the notion that memory can outlast flesh, that defiance can take form beyond the grave. For every empire that falls, for every tyrant who dreams of immortality, there exists a shadow of their ambition lingering in the cracks of history. Perhaps Hitler's final secret was not power but permanence, the illusion that ideas, no matter how monstrous, can survive through machines, through men, through myths. But if that was his dream, then Porter's defiance became the answer, the soldier who found the secret and refused to let it breathe. He may have failed to destroy the device, but he ensured it would never serve its master. In that sense, he became both savior and prisoner, guardian of a truth too dangerous to set free. Modern physicists still argue over the plausibility of the device. Some dismiss it as fantasy. Others point to unexplainable readings, classified photographs, and patterns in archived transmissions. Coincidence, skeptics say. Continuity, believers reply. The argument continues, but deep beneath Munich's rebuilt streets, concrete slabs and forgotten tunnels tell a quieter story. The hum persists, faint, patient, eternal. And though the city moves above it, trains, footsteps, laughter, somewhere below, something remembers. Porter's final words echo across time, written in the margin of his last recovered note. Every generation rediscovers the light. The question is, will they understand it before it burns them? That warning now feels prophetic. For as technology advances, humanity edges closer to the same pursuit, a fusion of mind and machine, will and energy. The very dream Porter feared is once again within reach. Perhaps that's why the hum grows louder every decade, not from the earth, but from ourselves. History doesn't repeat, it resonates. And somewhere, beyond reason or faith, Arthur Porter's reflection still waits in that endless pulse, the rhythm of mankind's eternal experiment with its own shadow. Maybe one day the machine will wake again, not to destroy or to save, but to remind us of what we once tried to forget. That the greatest danger is not the weapon we build, but the reflection it shows us. And when that light rises once more, the world will have to decide whether to look away or finally see.